Hello, and thank you for joining us for CBM Calling. We're happy that you're watching with us today. Today on our show, we want to share with you about the Canadian Foodgrains Bank and CBM's membership in the Foodgrains Bank. And particularly, we want to talk about the inspiring story that's behind the Coronation Grow Project in Brownfield, Alberta. I love this story because it always reminds me about how much can be done when we work together to help people in need. Well, today I am joined by one of my favorite people in the world. Sorry to embarrass you, Gord, but you are. I'm joined by Gordon King, who is my former colleague. We worked together for many years at CBM. And Gord has been involved with the Foodgrains Bank in the time that he was with CBM, helping to direct our involvement there. And he's also a member of Westview Baptist Church in Calgary. And Westview has been involved as well in that project. So, Gord, I'm so happy that you're joining us today. How are you doing?
Doing well, and there's not a topic I'd like to be involved in discussing more than the one of Foodgrains Bank and the response to people who suffer from hunger.
Well, I wonder if you can just tell us, what is the Foodgrains Bank? Sometimes people who support CBM have actually never even heard of the Foodgrains Bank or don't know what the connection is between CBM and the Foodgrains Bank. I'm wondering if you can just tell us more about what the relationship is and how people can be involved in supporting Foodgrains Bank and CBM food projects this way.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I've heard the Foodgrains Bank described in two different ways. Either as one of Canada's best kept secrets, because so few people really know about the Canadian Foodgrains Bank, and that it's Canada's leading organization in responding to international hunger. I've also heard it described as probably the best example of ecumenical functioning in Canada, because the member organizations of the Foodgrains Bank are 15 Christian denominations in Canada. And Anglicans, United Roman Catholics, Baptists, Pentecostals, we all find our place at the table to work around issues of hunger. In terms of support, the support tends to come from 4 different areas. First of all, Foodgrains Bank was started by farmers, and farmer organizations, farming communities are still the backbone of support for Foodgrains Bank. They no longer donate crops, but they donate the money that's generated from crops to CFGB, and usually to a denominational account such as CBM within CFGB. A second means of support comes from churches. There are congregations who make an annual commitment to the Canadian Foodgrains Bank. There are also congregations that in a time of particular need, such as the Syrian crisis, will have a special collection and give it to the Canadian Foodgrains Bank, earmarked perhaps for their denomination. And finally, thirdly, support can come from individuals who give either to CBM for the Foodgrains Bank program or give directly to the Foodgrains Bank, but in our case, noting that it's for the CBM account. Finally, whatever the government in Canada is at the federal level, there seems to be support for CFGB. And there's $25 million a year, I think now, that's given from the federal government of Canada to support the Foodgrains Bank projects. And really, it's the federal government that has endorsed CFGB as an effective way to respond to global hunger.
Yeah, thanks, Gord. That is one of the questions we often will get is, does CBM get matching grants from the government? And the answer is, the only way we do get them now is through the Foodgrains Bank. So our projects through the Foodgrains Bank are still eligible to get matching grants from the government. But our other work through CBM, we don't get that anymore. We used to in a different time in history, we used to get them from what used to be called CEDA, and now we no longer receive that. So our work through the Foodgrains Bank, yes, we do get matching funds. I wonder if you could also tell us more about this very unique model of urban and rural partnerships. So, with the Brownfield project, the Coronation Grow project, there's a very unique relationship that project has with two urban churches. So one is yours, Westview Baptist Church in Calgary, and then one is mine, Lorne Park Baptist Church in
Yeah.
Mississauga, Ontario, which you're thinking, how did that connection get made? Well, that connection got made through you. So I'm wondering if you can just tell us more about how you put that together and what was your thinking behind creating that relationship.
Well, I'd like to attribute it to myself, but I really think it was God's Spirit who did this, and that it would be arrogant to take credit for it. But the group of farmers in Brownfield, their story was simply inspiring, and the amount of money they could generate through the sale of their crops was contingent upon having some support for fertilizer, seeds, and other inputs. In other words, the more we could help them with expenses, the greater the amount of money that would be given for matching funds from the government. So it didn't take an economist to figure out helping with input costs could be really effective. At the time, I was a member of Lorne Park Baptist Church, where you are now, Jennifer, and we took this to the pastoral staff and to the mission committee. I think the mission committee at that time had Ann Drost on it, who was the ultimate cheerleader for anything like this. So it wasn't a hard sell to get our Thanksgiving offering to go to CFGB for 1 year. And once that started, and once we had people come from Brownfield and speak at Lorne Park, we wanted to do that. The relationship with Westview Baptist in Calgary that I now attend really came through people in Brownfield who were known at Westview. And so it was, that was one of the attractions for Regina and I to become members at Westview when we moved to Calgary, was that they were connected into CFGB and Brownfield. Those two churches, it seems to me it's such an intriguing mix, because you've got rural farmers, you've got in the same province an urban church, and then you've got a distant urban church in Ontario. And Albertans and Ontarians don't always get along real easy. But we've got this partnership that we're all proud of, and that we all would like to see further investment in. And it's just such a wonderful community that forms between the churches and the farmers.
For sure. And I don't know if you knew this, Gord. I probably did tell you that we brought a group of kids from my church from Lorne Park to go visit Brownfield a couple of years ago, and my daughter was one of them. And the kids were, most of the kids had never ever left the city before. So for them to go and visit rural Alberta was like going into another universe that they could never have imagined. But it was like love at first sight. And for all of them, and our hope in doing that was that we were going to build the next generation that in our church that was going to be the champions, the next Andros, who would be the champions of that project continuing and that partnership continuing. So that is one of the things I hope that we would have achieved by doing that. Gord, can you tell us more just about how growing projects work, and particularly how that Coronation Grow Project began? Because that's the original one. I think that's the very first one. It actually, that's how I think the Foodgrains Bank even started, was through two Canadian Baptist farmers who then later morphed that into the Foodgrains Bank. I wonder if you can just give us some of the history of that.
Yeah, it's such a great story, and it goes back to the time of Bruce Neal as chair of the Sharing Way, and a group of Mennonite farmers had responded, would now be probably 35 years ago, to a famine. I believe it was in Ethiopia. And they'd actually sent farm produce, grain, and had it transported to Ethiopia with some help from the federal government to respond to those famine needs. When they were looking at it for a second year, the Baptist Church in Brownfield wanted to become involved, and I believe there were other denominations that were wanting to participate. And that at that time, as I was saying, the farm produce, the crops were not monetized; they were transported. And so there's still stories from Brownfield about trucking the grain to the nearest train station from where it would be transported. And in some ways, a great deal of satisfaction in participating in that. So that was on the local level, but at a more administrative level, with the participation of the other churches, this needed to move out of the Mennonite Central Committee and have its own structure. And Bruce Neal and Arnold Epp were the two Baptists who were founding members of the board of the Canadian Foodgrains Bank. And Bruce Neal was the first chairperson of it.
Right.
And I think a lot of credit needs to go to Bruce, because now there's a tradition of working together, but there was no tradition back then. And there was some turf warfare that would inevitably take place. And Bruce guided through that process. And it started out with just a few denominations. Now we're up to 15. So that's how it started. My favorite story of just the spirit of the Brownfield farmers actually comes from more my time and your time, Jennifer. And I don't know if you recall that at one point, one of the farmers, Byron Richardson, contacted us and said that they were going to have to move up the harvest because they were expecting snow. And snow will lessen the quality of the grain and depress the price. And the farmers in Brownfield, the group that collaborated in the growing project, decided that they would harvest what they called the Lord's crop before they would harvest their own crop. And every farmer took a hit, a significant financial hit, but the Lord's crop came off first.
Yeah, I love that story. That is, I think, the story that is always stuck in my mind is just, and when I visited there, I could feel that, just how much priority they put into this project they do together. It is such a community project. There's people who don't even go to Brownfield Baptist Church who are part of it. And the level of commitment to the project is, it's inspiring. So over the 30 years, they have raised, and I don't know the exact figure, but it is probably in the hundreds of millions of dollars because of the matching funds. So over the last, probably the last 5 or 6, they have designated the funds from the sale of the grain to the Lebanon project for the Syrian refugee food project. And it's been eligible for 4-to-1 matching. So with the 4-to-1 matching, you can imagine, like, on any given year, if the price for which they've sold the grain is good, with the 4-to-1 match, I mean, it is a project that has an incredible impact. I know that you know about some of the ways that this project has helped on the ground. So I'm wondering if you can just give us some more details about where you've seen the impact of what this Grow project has done.
Yeah, I know I know of some of the impact because one of the members of our church here at Westview was involved with Rupen Das in managing the food project in Lebanon. And I know about it because the pastor of one of the Lebanese Baptist churches, a man whose name was Jihad Haddad,
Oh, yes.
stayed in our home in Winnipeg, and
Okay.
we were able to talk to him about it. And I think for Canadians, we have to remember that Syria had occupied Lebanon for years, and it was not a benevolent occupation.
Mm-hmm.
Many Lebanese had suffered under Syrian rule, and it had been a violent rule. And so when suddenly Syrian people started pouring across the border, to the extent that a quarter of the population of Lebanon became Syrian refugees, it not only overwhelmed social systems, but it created a degree of resentment among many Lebanese. And Baptist churches were a response to it that expressed Christian compassion and love for people that might have been considered enemies by some people. And part of it was food. Part of it was using church buildings to set up schools when Syrian refugee children were not allowed into schools in Lebanon, and finding ways to employ Syrian teachers in teaching children who were in the country as refugees. Part of it was helping people find jobs, find accommodation. I mean, but the food was a critical element in it. And Rupin and his colleague Madge even found ways to ship food into churches in Syria so that they could help in Syrian communities dealing with displaced people. So it's a magnificent story that I hope someday will be told in either video or in written form.
As we think a lot about food in these days with this global food crisis that has been the result of COVID-19. And I think Foodgrains Bank and our ability to extend our reach through the Foodgrains Bank, it's so much more than we could just do as one organization or separate organizations. With 15 member bodies, the Foodgrains Bank is able to have a reach that is much, much wider than we could do individually. And I really hope that people who are watching will consider supporting the work that is being done through the Foodgrains Bank, especially in this few years that are upcoming, because I think we have just begun to hear the stories of what is happening to people who are already living in the margins. I think we're going to start to hear a lot more about the global food crisis that is just looming, and the extent, the wide scale of it that is actually a little scary when you hear the projections of how many people in the world are going to go hungry because of this, or are already going hungry because of this. So we want to also just let people know how they can support this work. So Gord, I don't know if you have some suggestions how people can support this work. So people who are listening to this are probably sitting maybe in their, in a city and going, how do I support a food project or a grow project like Brownfield? What can we do? I wonder if you have suggestions, Gord.
Yeah, we have a number of growing projects in Canada, and now that I'm semi-retired, I'm not as up on it as I once was. But I know here in Western Canada we have at least 3, and I believe there's others in other parts of Canada. So I think one way is for churches to become involved. It's a wonderful Thanksgiving offering, although in our church it's our Christmas project is to support the growing project in Brownfield. Individuals can also make a contribution, and knowing that contribution will be matched by the federal government. So donations can be made directly to Canadian Baptist Ministries, saying that it's for the Canadian Foodgrains Bank projects that CBM has, or as I recently did, I made a donation directly to CFGB, but I could do it online and signify that the account that my donation will go into is Canadian Baptist Ministries.
That's great. Yeah. And if people want to support one of the other growing projects that you mentioned, we do have one in Truro, Nova Scotia as well. So we have a Grow Hope project now in Truro. So it's the first official one that's a Baptist growing project. So if people want to do that, you can actually go onto a page that we have. So it's cbmin.org/grow hope. Nova Scotia, and you can go specifically if you want to support that one in Truro. I know they would welcome the support because they're just trying to get that one off the ground. They've been running for a couple of years, but they'd like it to go bigger. So I know they would appreciate the support. So that would be a great way for people, individuals, as you said, and churches as well, to be able to support a grow project. Even if you're not a farmer and you can't actually do the growing yourself, this is a wonderful way to do it, is to provide some support as other farmers do it, as farmers do it. So we want to say hello to a few people who are watching today, Gord. We have Nancy Webb says hello. Nancy from Kingsway Baptist Church. So she would know Bruce Neal very well. So hi, Nancy. Always good to hear from Nancy. And we have lots of people who are saying hello to you, Gord, because I'm sure they haven't talked to you in a while and your former colleague. So Barb Keys says hi, and so does Gordon Brew and Dennis Sherman and Randy Stanton. They all say, great to see you, Gord, and thank you for sharing about this important program. So we want to say thanks. We're going to end our conversation here. We know it's a Friday afternoon and people probably want to go out and enjoy the beautiful weather. Well, it's beautiful here in Toronto. I don't know about everywhere else, but we want to say thank you to everybody who joined us today. And please do go and explore the Foodgrains Bank website. They have wonderful resources on there. They're a wonderful organization, and we are very grateful to be part of the Foodgrains Bank. Thank you so much, Gord. It's always so good to talk to you. I wish we'd do it more often, but you had to move to Calgary. So I don't get to see you that often, but always good to catch up with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. And greetings to each and every one.
Take care, everyone. Bye.